Okay, and we are live.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Carl Richardson. I am the co-chair of the Audio Description Project. Before we get started, I want to turn it over to Katie to bring up some housekeeping agenda items.
First thing I'd like to do is tell everyone your opening CEU number. It is 25295.
And if I understand you correctly, Katie, to get the full credit, they'll also need to stay to the end to hear the
Ending quote, yes.
Okay,
And
great.
I will read the ending number at the end. I will not read the beginning number again.
Okay, thank you. So again, hello, welcome everybody. To everybody that's joining in across the country listening to this. This is our tradition of doing some sort of audio description industry update at our annual convention. And while the past few years we have focused on streaming services, we decided to look at a different perspective and look at more television broadcast and cable broadcast, because there's a lot of ways to get audio description, and we wanted to educate the consumers who don't necessarily use streaming or who can't afford to have all these streaming services, or who just have a TV with the digital antenna or a cable box and don't want to give up their cable, for instance, if they're, into sports. So we wanted to make sure that we educated those on a multiple number of ways to get audio description. Before we get started, though, I want to use my prerogative as co-chair of the Audio Description Project to brag about the Audio Description Project, if you will. So I am the co-chair along with Kim Charlton, and we are an advocacy arm within the American Council of the Blind, where we advocate for all things audio description. We want more audio description, we want quality audio description, and we want it in all areas of my life. Within the committee, we have several subcommittees. We have a conference committee chaired by Kim Charlton, which plans and arranges the committees that we hear at our annual conferences here in June and July, and the DC Leadership Forum in the winter. We have a Section 508 committee, which is chaired by Pat Sheehan, which has to do with government rules and regulations, what the government agencies have to do in terms of audio description. And he is actually a 508 coordinator for one of the larger government agencies, so he's a very, very valuable resource. We have a BADIE committee, BADIE, Benefits of Audio Description in Education, which is actually one of my favorites, because where we have an annual contest every year with, I believe, middle school and high school students, where we ask them to watch something with audio description and then ask them to write a review of it, so that we hope that we teach younger viewers what audio description is, and they grow up and use it and spread the word. And that's always a lot of fun. And this year, the winner of that contest will be reading her essay at one of our general sessions during the convention. We also have a performing arts committee, which deals with parks, recreational places, and live theater museums. That's very important with audio description, and that is shared by Sheila Young. And then we have what is my favorite, the media subcommittee, which is also shared by myself, which deals with streaming, broadcast, cable, DVD, anything to do with media. And that's been quite explosive in the last few years with streaming, broadcast, and all these things. We have an incredible website. The Audio Description Project website is adp.acb.org. That's ADP for Audio Description Project.acb.org. And on it, you can find information about all these things I mentioned, all the committees, what they're up to, as well as what's on TV on a given night. You can look it up by network, by title. We do our best to keep it updated. Sometimes it's hard to pull all the information from the various sources, but we do the best we can. We also have a list of what's on all the different streaming services, whether it be, I don't know, we have a couple of them here, so I'll mention them: Paramount Plus and Peacock, so I'll mention those. And we have a master list of all the titles that we know of that have been described to date, as well as what's currently playing in the movie theater. So it's a valuable list and a valuable resource, plus articles about what's going on in the world of audio description today. So I have it as a shortcut on my desktop, and I check it on a fairly regular basis. I also want to highlight some of the things we will be doing audio description related during the convention, and then I'll take a breath and let other people talk. But earlier today, we had a panel on audio description, Nothing About Us Without Us, which was recorded, and you'll be able to watch or listen to it at a later time as a podcast. And that had to do with blind or visually impaired individuals who work in the field of audio description, whether they are blind consultants, audio editors, voice talent, and in some cases, writers of audio description. And we just wanted to highlight that the blindness community feels stronger, that feels better, that when audio description is better when the blindness community is included in the process. So that was an interesting panel. We have this one now, which we'll talk about shortly. And then on Saturday, we have one on self-description. And that's a fairly new thing, and in some cases, best practices when people are hosting meetings, and we're still figuring out, how to do it, and if there is a need to do it. And you're going to hear from different sides and the different opinions of those who embraced it, and maybe those who don't necessarily embrace it as heartily, and also hear from a couple of people who will give more of a scholarly or academic perspective on the use of audio description and self-description in general. We have a professor from England who's done a study on it, so that should be an interesting panel. And then potentially, I say potentially because we're still working on getting all the stuff we need and the clearances we need, we will have West Side Story streamed on air, audio only, for those who want to hear West Side Story with audio description. And I say potential. It's 90% in the process, but I just want to make sure, so stay tuned for emails from Janet Dickelman, who will be updating everybody on those, on the latest in those areas. So today, we are going to talk about audio description and broadcast and cable. And we'll probably talk a little bit about streaming too, because we have a couple of people here who represent all areas of the areas that I just mentioned. But before we do that, I thought it would be helpful if I first introduce Clark before I introduce Clark Rockfall, before I introduce the three main panelists who will be talking to us, so that he could give us a little background on the 21st century the 21st Century Communication Video Accessibility Act, so he could explain to you what our rights are, what we can expect in terms of audio description, in terms of broadcast, cable, and the accessibility of the devices themselves that give us the audio description. So Clark Rockfall, Director of Government Relations and Advocacy for ACB. And also my doppelganger, because we're in a lot of meetings together, and he gets called Carl all the time, and I get called Clark all the time, which I don't know why, because I'm funnier and better looking than him, but it just happens. So anyway, Clark, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Carl. You also forgot you're more humble than I am as well.
Well, yeah, that goes without saying.
Well, and thank you so much for having me or allowing me to join you for this conversation here this evening. And hello to everyone in our audience for this virtual session of the 2022 ACB Conference and Convention. As Carl said, my name is Clark Rockfall. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Governmental Affairs for the American Council of the Blind. And I'm here just to provide a quick overview, because I'm not the main act here this evening. Our panelists are, but Carl asked me to share a bit on what is included in the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010. And because that is a very long title, we call it the CVAA for short. So in 2010, the CVAA was passed, and this reinstated the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC's, audio description rules. And these rules state that the four main broadcasters, so your ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC affiliates at that time in the top 60 designated market areas. So figure a designated market area is basically the broadcasters for the city or the area that the broadcaster covers. So your largest broadcast designated market areas are New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Chicago, Atlanta, cities like that. There are over 200 broadcast designated market areas. So these regulations said that the top 60 and those four broadcasters in those top 60 markets had to start passing through audio description. At the time, they had to pass through audio description totaling 50 hours per quarter every 3 months. Now we're up to 87.5 hours per quarter, roughly 7 hours per week, also equivalent to 1 out of 24 hours per day. And this 87.5 hours covers primetime programming, as well as children's programming and other programming between, I believe it's 6 a.m. and midnight. In addition to the four broadcasters, the audio description requirements extend to video programmers from pay TV services. So pay TV services are typically cable providers, satellite, or if you receive television similar to cable from your telephone company. These rules state that cable providers with more than, pay TV providers, not just cable, but pay TV providers with more than 50,000 subscribers also need to pass through audio description in addition to the four broadcasters for the top 5 video programmers. Currently, this list includes channels you've probably heard of: TLC, HGTV, Hallmark, History, and TBS. This list is reevaluated every 3 years. So there are programmers such as USA Network or the Discovery Channel that have previously been included on this list of top 5 programmers, but due to changes in consumer viewing habits and market trends, they're no longer part of the top 5. Also, some notable exceptions from this list of top 5, Carl: the cable news channels or sports networks. So for example, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ESPN, and others. These are highly watched video programming from pay TV providers, but because they show so much live and near live programming, they are able to apply for exemptions to be excluded from the top 5. I stated before that the top 60 designated market areas were initially required to pass through audio description. That has now expanded to the top 80 designated market areas. And for the next 2 years, an additional 10 market areas will be added on. So in 2023, the top 90 designated market areas, and in 2024, the top 100 designated market areas will be required to pass through audio description, again, for those 4 main broadcasters: ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC. There are not requirements in place for public broadcast stations to pass through audio description. but many of them do. In addition to expanding or having the capability of expanding the number of designated market areas, again, 2024 will be up to 100. And again, that's out of more than 200. So still plenty of work to be done there. The FCC has also expanded the number of hours. I stated we're now up to 87.5 hours per quarter, roughly 7 hours per week, 1 hour per day. The FCC has now reached the maximum extent that it can expand the number of hours that they can require for the pass-through of audio description for broadcasters and pay TV video programmers. All this audio description is great, Carl, but it wouldn't be as impactful for you, me, and our audience if there also weren't requirements for consumers to be able to access audio description. So also included in the CVAA were requirements on video playback and control devices. So think your televisions, set-top boxes, and even devices used to stream video content over the internet, laptops and computers. Ever since December of 2016, if these products are designed for the purpose of receiving and playing back video synchronized with audio, they must be designed with accessible user interfaces. And these accessible user interfaces cover a lot of the controls that are needed to operate the device, to turn it on and turn it off, the volume controls, the audio description and closed caption settings, the video programming, channel selection, playback controls, anything you would need to do to be able to access the programming of your choice, as well as to enable audio description, whether that's done through on-screen menus or it's done using a remote control. It has to be an easy path, an intuitive path to be able to activate audio description and use those player controls. So Carl, that's a quick overview of what is included in the CVAA as it pertains to the Federal Communication Commission's rules for audio description and the accessibility of video user interfaces and playback controls and devices.
Well, thank you, Clark. You're definitely a better public speaker than I am. So before I introduce the panelists, I want to let everybody know that we will be taking email questions, and if we have time, some questions from some of the participants who are viewing this. And if you want to send a question, you can send it to advocacy@acb.org. That's advocacy@acb.org. Keep your questions short and to the point, and we'll do our best to get to your questions. So I am pleased to announce that we have 3 panelists representing at least 5 of the 9 entities that Clark mentioned required under CVAA, and some of them even represent more than those 5 channels, and we'll let them talk about that as they introduce themselves. But I will first give you a brief description of each participant. And in no particular order, this is just how I happen to memorize them. And if I missed anything in your bio, I apologize ahead of time because I'm doing this from memory. So first we have Laurie Samuels, who is the Senior Director of Accessibility at NBC Universal. She leads strategic accessible projects to do inclusive design and best practices, and also train digital access platform providers on best practices. She also fostered a culture of diversity and disability inclusion, and fosters executive partnership within NBC. Next, we have Martha Heller, who joined Paramount Global in 2020. She is the Vice President of Government Relations and Legal Counsel for Paramount Global. Before that, where she represents Paramount Global in front of government agencies such as the FCC and other agencies, and advises Paramount Global on government policies and issues relating to them. Before that, she served in many leadership positions at the FCC, including being division chief at the Media Bureau, held a senior management position with the Enforcement Division, and was legal advisor for former Commissioner Clybourne. She was formerly a partner at Wiley LLP and got a law degree from the University of Virginia, and also attended Cornell University. Next, we have Janet Ritt, who is the Director of Government Compliance and Regulation, and also the head of the Center of Excellence for Accessibility, which she created. And it's her vision and her vision that drove and created the Center of Accessibility. She wrote all the guidelines and all the policies that are in the Center of Excellence. She also worked across the whole division of Warner Brother Discovery to advise them on accessibility and best practices. She brings a unique perspective because not only is she in charge of accessibility, but before this, she ran an IT department and also was a writer and producer, and she's able to bring all her skills and knowledge from all her previous backgrounds to work with people of all different backgrounds to foster inclusivity and best practices and accessibility. So we are very honored and proud to have Janet, Martha, and Laurie on this panel. Thank you very much to all three of you for agreeing to join us. We're just going to do an open style of communication where we all jump in as we see fit as I ask questions, and each panelist can choose whether or not to ask the questions as they see fit. My first question to you guys is, first of all, which company do you represent? What channels do you represent? And what are you playing in terms of audio description, the types of shows and media? And if you feel comfortable, how many hours do you think you're currently doing in audio description?
I'm happy to start. Hi, I'm Laurie. I represent NBC Universal, which is a large umbrella over lots of brands. I think we have a total of 36 or something at counting, but that includes, of course, NBC entertainment, sports, and news, as well as cable brands like USA Network, E, Bravo, Sci-Fi, and our streaming service, which is Peacock. We're absolutely thrilled to provide audio description, and we track that, of course, on the NBC entertainment side. All of our scripted television programs from Universal Television do have audio description. We well exceed the number of required hours, about double in this last quarter of the required hours. Some of our shows that include that are, classics like all the Chicago series, Law and Order, SVU, American Ninja Warrior, Weakest Link, and many others. We also have provided live audio description for special events, such as the Macy's Day Parade, the Christmas tree lighting upcoming right now. We've got the 4th of July fireworks special, which will have live audio description, planning for the Emmys as well. And then we, of course, did the Olympics and Paralympics primetime audio description that was live as well. So,
and you're winning an award for your coverage of the Special Olympics.
That. Yes,
congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
And I'll just say real quick, this is the first year in my memory as a blind viewer that I can remember having the ability to watch, because all the different networks participated, that I had the ability to watch the Emmys, the Grammys, the Oscars, and the Tonys. And who'd have thought I'd get to see Will Smith slap Chris Rock with audio description? But anyway, and it's been interesting, and we'll talk about this.
So I had to ask you, Carl, did they describe that?
No, actually, that whole thing got muted. I was just trying to be funny. It all got muted, the primary audio plus the audio description.
Okay.
But it is interesting. We saw a dramatic increase overall between the inauguration and all the award ceremonies and the Olympics. We saw, and CBS did a number of events. I want to give, and so did Discovery, Warner Discovery, with the I believe it was the Screen Actors Guild. Yes. So all three participants on this list did a dramatic increase in live audio description, which was fascinating. So Laurie, or not Laurie, I mean Martha or Janet?
I'm happy to jump in next after Laurie. This is Martha Heller with Paramount Global, and thank you, Clark and Carl. I meant to say that in the reverse order. Sorry, guys. For having me here tonight. It's always a pleasure to do events with the ACB. So Paramount Global has a number of different media properties in the United States and across the world, as the name of our company suggests. I'm going to focus, for purposes of this panel, on the CBS television network, given the focus on traditional media for this panel tonight. But in addition to CBS, we also own a large number of cable networks, 20 some odd different cable networks that include, for example, the Smithsonian Channel, the MTV networks, Comedy Central, and a whole list of others that I'm sure will come to mind in a moment. And then we, beyond that, we have streaming properties as well, as Carl alluded. Our flagship is Paramount Plus. We also have a Showtime, which is also one of our networks, but we also have a streaming application for, similar with BET, another example that is both a programming network that has a streaming platform as an outgrowth. So turning to, what we're doing on audio description, and again, kind of turning back to CBS, which has, a long history, as hopefully ACB well knows, and others know as well, of being highly committed to audio description. We have consistently surpassed, we have always surpassed what the FCC has mandated by a significant margin. This year has been especially significant for us, in addition to the live award shows that Carl referred to. We also had a significant milestone this year because we added a total of 7 new scripted primetime programmings to the list of those that are available with audio description. And as a result of that, we now have audio description for virtually all of our pre-recorded scripted primetime shows, as well as pre-record, as well as where we can for reality shows that are pre-recorded, such as Survivor and The Amazing Race. And in addition to that, we audio describe movies and specials as much as we can. And on top of all that, we provide audio description for our entire 3-hour block of children's educational shows. So kind of boiling that all down to the number of hours, we have about 18 hours on CBS of primetime shows that are described. plus the 3 hours of educational programming for children. And that adds up to about 21 hours per week. So all told, we do provide roughly, over 270 hours per quarter. Now, not all of that counts under the FCC's rules, just to be clear, most of it does. But that includes the, original airings of each of those shows, plus, one repeat. That's what the FCC recognizes in terms of its threshold of 87 hours that Clark mentioned. But in addition to that, that number that I mentioned, 270 hours, also includes some additional repeats. But all that said, and even so, we still surpass what the FCC requires on CBS by at least, conservatively 2 to 2.5 times each quarter. So, just to mention a few of the specific shows that we do, some of the recent additions just this year include the show Ghosts, which is one of our kind of breakout hits of this year. The Amazing Race and Survivor, all of our CSI programs, our NCIS programs, The Equalizer, Young Sheldon, as well as a number of others. So that's an overview of what we're doing on CBS currently.
Martha, so I have a quick question. What made Paramount Global, or CBS more in particular, decide this year to increase the amount of audio description to primetime program? What drove that decision?
I think it was just, an internal, I don't want to say I have a lot of insight into the actual decision process, but I know it's just part of our company culture to always be reevaluating what we can do and when we can do more. And, it's something that we look at every year. And this year we found the budget and the resources to do it. So we moved forward. We're constantly, and CBS is not the only place where we're looking to add audio description. So we are constantly looking for new opportunities to do more.
Well, and I suspect because there's some synergy between, just like there is for NBC and Peacock, they do the same thing. There would probably be some synergy between Paramount Plus and CBS, and that you can transfer the shows back and forth and have audio described content on both. So that probably played a minor role in that too. So that's great. And we're hoping that all the networks follow. And actually, I think all 3 representatives will be able to see, from what I've looked at, the numbers that you're all exceeding the minimum number of hours required, which is a great thing. So next we have Janet. Oh, I already introduced Janet. Do you want to talk about what you guys are up to?
Yes, thank you so much. And also thank you for inviting me and Carl and Clark. And also, I just want to give a shout out to my fellow panelists. I really love their work. So I'm coming here both representing Warner Brothers Discovery and a fan of my fellow panelists and the products they put out. Just want to say that. So Warner Brothers Discovery, the caveat I'm going to start with is that we just merged and are merging. And so the dust is still settling, and that does limit me on some things I can say, but I'll try to be as transparent as possible. And in some cases it limits me because I don't know where the dust is going to settle. So I just wanted to put that caveat out. And but the good news is that it's 2 companies that are complementary that have come together, and both sides are doing audio description, believe in audio description, and as you said, exceed the required amounts. So for that, we have more networks, as you said, that are on the list. And we also do have streaming HBO Max, which we're not talking about here, but there is a feature where some products from that do come over, much like they were talking about on the other side. So it's hard not to address the fact that some of the things I'll be mentioning on broadcast might have actually originated there. And it's an interesting feature of that. So that includes for TBS, which is on the list, and TNT and True TV, which have fallen off the list, but we still audio described. Discovery, that's fallen off the list, but still audio described. HGTV, and quite a few other things, as we mentioned. The Discovery Channel, it includes a lot. And then we have we look at the originals, we look at the acquired content, and then, as you said, the live content, like with the SAG Awards, which is very exciting and went over very well, not only with the audience, but we were really happy about it too. And there is that sense of satisfaction of doing something innovative and new. So some of the series that we can talk about on TBS, things like Snowpiercer on the original side, we do describe, and I'm only speaking because there was a little concern about speaking about too much about numbers again when we're merging, but just looking at the last quarter, 100% of our originals, over 1,500 hours of AD, and TNT, I won't get into the numbers, but and True TV, but well exceeding, and again, that commitment to originals. On the Discovery side, and I do want to give a shout out to them. We're just all getting to know each other, but I really love what I'm seeing, so it's very exciting. But I'm also quoting with great authority on some of the things with them, so please forgive me for that. But 3 of our networks do fall in: HGTV, TLC, and TBS. We do go over the required number of hours and strive to do so, and that's the key to it. And some of the shows include 90 Day Fiancé, Street Outlaws, House Hunters, just pretty much every popular show they have. And then we get into the acquired series and movies. So some examples on TBS would be an example from HBO Max, The Flight Attendant, which has now made its way to broadcast. And so the AD came with that. Also Titans, Harley Quinn, are DC films, because we are also DC. I should say that about us. Warner Brothers Discovery is also DC, also CNN, also HBO Max, right. Also a lot of different entities, of which we're very proud. And then we get with Discovery a lot of sports, which we also have. So I personally am very excited about that. And all of the fantastic shows on the Discovery networks that I've been obsessively watching now that I have access. So we also acquire material from other studios, some of our counterpart that's not here, like the Star Wars films, the Marvel films, make their way onto TBS, and we get those described.
Oh, wow, good.
Yeah, so good way to find those. And again, I'm really happy to be here.
So it sounds like, and this isn't, well, first of all, thank you for doing more than required, in that you also do TNT and True TV and Discovery, which have all fallen off. The fact that you're maintaining your commitment means a lot, because that hasn't always been the case. And this is Carl talking, not anybody else. I personally would like to see, once the stations are required to do it, that they're always required to do it, but that's another story for another day. So it sounds like, when I listen to the 3 of you presenting, that the studios and the network and the cable stations are starting to do a better job talking to each other, requiring audio description assets as a part of their deliverables. Would you all agree with that?
Anyone else take that?
But it sounds like it. None of you have to answer that. I'm just saying, based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like that there's starting to be more synergy and more communication among all of you, just like you would all request the caption file, and that's great. And I know, Laurie, on your side, you guys are maintaining your commitment to USA.
Yeah, for USA Network, yes, and we've added and are increasing audio description on E, Bravo, and Sci-Fi as well. So
let's mention those. So
yeah, so let me see. I'm going to grab a couple of shows off of that. So for Sci-Fi, we've got the Harry Potter shows, Maleficent, Bad Boys, Doctor Strange. And then for let's see, for Bravo. Oh no, maybe that was looking at, that was Bravo, sorry. Wrong spreadsheet. And then for E, we've got, let's see, a lot of different shows. Luck Be a Lady, Cover Girl, Anchors Away. So lots of different ones. Some of these show up on more than one cable network, of course. So definitely keeping the commitment on USA Network, as that was one of those top 5 cable networks before. And so, you
added a few.
And we've added a few more, yeah.
So given that actually segues to my next question. Clark mentioned earlier, they were the 9 required, but it sounds like there's 13 or 14 of them now, if you combine everybody on cable or broadcast combined. And it's hard for us to know what's on a given night, because at this point in time, there's still more that's not audio described than is. Is there a place that any of you offer as a resource to go to? And I'm going to recommend the ADP website, but we do the best we can and don't always know. So do you guys have a place of your own or a resource of your own where you maintain a listing of what you offer for audio description?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on that if I could. There are several ways people can find this information, and one of them is on the FCC website. There are links by channel on those lists to our what are called our DVS listings, and those would be what's on that schedule that night that is audio described. And so that for us would be for TBS, TNT, TL, I think it's almost everything. So that's one area that we strive to keep up to date. And then there are individual websites also that would have that information in curated lists. So I don't want to speak for others, but I do want to also say that there was an interesting thing that Laurie said in giving her list, which is Harry Potter, which is Warner Brothers, which is us. And so there is an example of some handshaking across the room here.
Yes.
That makes me very happy to hear, because I'm a big Harry Potter fan.
And I was going to mention the FCC.gov website for audio description as well. That's a great place to kind of get each of the major networks. We have on NBC.com, we have a rolling 2-week schedule of audio described programming that you can go there to see kind of what the current list of programs are and what time they're on, what date they're on. So we try to maintain that. And we're trying to build out one for USA Network as well. That one's just a little bit bigger because of all the repeats, but we'll hope to have that live later this year.
Right.
Yeah, and I also think it's really wonderful the way that all of the different studios are settling in, if I may say, to find the best way to do this. I don't know about the others, but I watch what you do. I'm a fan, as I said. I watch what you do, and where something is innovative, I do bring it up. So we help each other even without talking to each other. Yeah, at least on our end. But yeah.
Martha, you concur that the FCC is the best place to go to for up-to-date information?
Well, yes, I think that's a great point that the other panelists have made. In addition to that, we do have a webpage for CBS, which is cbs.com/video-description. And that has a list of the CBS programs. Currently, it needs to be updated a bit. That's something that we are working on right now, to bring it up to date with the new programs, the new network programs that I've mentioned. So it's not exactly up to date right now, but it is a resource that we have and that we are currently revamping as we speak.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess just also kudos to to ACB for maintaining your website. The Audio Description Project website is a fantastic resource, and I look at it all the time just to get intel for myself, and it is just a remarkable resource. So I want to encourage people to look at that. It gives a great overview of what's going on in the industry.
So I would be remiss if we didn't give credit to our webmaster, Fred Brack.
That is awesome.
Who does that website for all of us. So I want to make sure he gets the credit he deserves. Thank you, Fred. Thank you for doing the programming on my Friday night, every Friday night with my wife. So my wife and I sit down and see what's there, and we try very hard to find something we're both like. And that can be a challenge because she doesn't necessarily want to watch Star Trek Discovery, and I don't necessarily want to watch, Running Away with the Bride or whatever it is. So anyway.
May I jump in on one thing too, that
Yep.
this is an example of where I'm learning all of our different sides. Discovery.com also has information about audio description on TLC, HGTV, and Discovery channels. So I wanted to make sure that I added that to the mix here.
Thank you. So we all heard Clark mention during his opening remarks that by law right now, we're only required, or the broadcast and cable folks only required to pass through the 80 to the top 80 market. But what's interesting about that is they're also required to pass through emergency notifications to all 200 plus markets through the SAP. So do we know if we are working to go beyond? And if you don't know the answer, that's fine. I'm just asking because every now and then we get a concern from someone in the smaller market who doesn't understand why they don't have audio description. So I just, so I'm just bringing that up.
I'll share. So all of the stations that are owned and operated by NBC Universal are already within the top 60, I believe, and we all pass AD, so that's no issue there. I think beyond that, then we have affiliate stations and we may have some smaller markets there. One interesting thing, I'll just sort of anecdotally somewhat during the, I guess it was the Beijing Olympics when we were doing live audio description, we had some social media hashtags out that I was kind of keeping tabs on to see if there was any feedback and about the audio description. And one gentleman in rural Georgia let us know that the audio description wasn't working. So I kind of messaged him and we got it out to our engineers, and this was a pretty rural area, and got anyway connected with the affiliate station, figured out the technology. Our engineers worked on it and got it working, so he was able to enjoy the rest of the Olympics. And it was he was so cute. I was posted a little tweet about how all of Georgia now had, or all of rural Georgia and Macon had audio description, so it's very exciting to see. So sometimes it just takes finding out if we're missing something and getting the engineers to go tackle it. So
well, maybe I'll just jump in next because I don't think this question is necessarily specific to Janet because she doesn't have the broadcast issue.
Yeah.
So what my answer is similar to Laurie's. So we have, of course, our O&O stations,
Right.
And all of those pass through audio description. Beyond that, we don't, we leave it up to the discretion of our affiliates, as long as they're complying with the FCC rules. We don't necessarily mandate that, or we don't mandate that they go above and beyond what's mandated by the FCC. So we leave that to the discretion of our affiliates, which I think is appropriate given the scope of the rules. But that said, I haven't heard a lot anecdotally, certainly about affiliates that we have that don't pass through audio description. But again, since we don't require that, I don't have an answer for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say on the Comcast side, we're proactive about educating our local engineering teams for those markets that are kind of further down the list, and so and definitely we are currently passing through in a lot of markets that are not yet required.
So did that,
yeah.
when you educate them, because this is further down the question list, but I might as well bring it up. For instance, I got a complaint recently, and it wasn't NBC, but I'll just use this as an example. We got a complaint about another network who they only heard the audio description out of the left channel only, and it was probably, if I had to guess, because the local station didn't encode it properly through their encoder, the audio signal through the encoder. So how much is there education in what audio description is and how to do it properly? And because to be honest, the consumer doesn't care that NBC and CBS and ABC and Fox and the cable networks only own markets in the top 50. They don't understand that.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate I live in the top 8 market in Boston.
Uh-huh.
But if I live in Biloxi, Biloxi, I don't know what market, and I don't know, and I'm not necessarily asking for answers if nobody feels comfortable. I'm just bringing up, not only do we want it in all markets, but sometimes, it'll interfere with the Spanish track, or it'll be in the right channel and not in stereo. So those are just, so when you do try to extend it to all markets, maybe we also educate the affiliates. And I understand the affiliates aren't necessarily required by law, but just educate.
No, I think that's very important. And I think that's kind of getting into your next question about the affiliate stations. And I would say, what I've observed and seen in practice is that we are, especially on the engineering and operations side, we have a very excellent relationship with the owned and affiliated station engineers. So, the owned stations, they use a common system for AD distribution to their audiences and MVPDs. So that's the owned stations. That's a common system. The affiliated stations might use different methods to supply AD. So some might be unique to the station. Some are used across an entire station group. But we work in partnership with our affiliates to sort of on the engineering side to assist them with how to receive the AD signal from NBC. And then we offer technical guidance and share best practices on how they might provide AD. So definitely there's troubleshooting that goes on, but there is. And again, it's not exactly governance, but it's definitely close technology partnership and collaboration.
Great, and I know I don't know if Janet, you have anything to add?
Oh, well, just that it's an interesting situation to be the intellectual property provider to someone like Laurie or someone like Martha, in that we have to make sure that what we're including is encoded correctly so that when they get it, it's received in a way that's useful to them. And because at that point they're the multi-video, what's called the MVPD provider, or carrying down the affiliates. I'm not talking well, sorry. And that then becomes their responsibility, but we want to give them things that work. And so we look pretty carefully at that. And that would be, because we really, as Martha said correctly, we're not NBC, we're CNN, but we're not NBC. And that in TBS, it's different. But we're here to facilitate that. So if they ever come back to us and say, this isn't looking right, we're certainly going to jump on that.
Great. Martha, you already said on this topic, unless you have anything else to add.
I just want to say, I definitely hear your concerns. I think what you're saying makes a tremendous amount of sense. I appreciate you making those points, Carl. On our end, we do also try to have, robust communications with our affiliates. We make resources available to them so that they can collaborate with our engineers to troubleshoot, to discuss issues. And the only thing I would add beyond that is that we also do work to keep in communication with them about what our offerings are. We notify them, for example, so that they're all aware and on the lookout when we add a program with audio description, when there's going to be a special, when we're doing something live. And on the flip side, we let them know when we're all, if there's an event, which is, rare, of course, but when there is a time when we're having a technical issue and are not able to pass through audio description. So we're very much in regular communication with our affiliates about what's going on at the network level.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And it's encouraging to hear what all three of you said. So I do appreciate that. And I know it's not easy. Haven't formally worked for a broadcast network myself. I understand some of the challenges. So now, to that effect, the FCC requires that all the stations have a captioning contact. So people, if they're deaf or hard of hearing, usually know who to reach out to if there is an issue, because sometimes it's just a matter of letting the engineer know they forgot to turn it on. I'd literally have called the station and had this situation rectified in 5 minutes. It was just an oversight. It wasn't intentional. So how would you suggest, if people are watching something or they want to bring to your attention a concern about audio description, is there a way to do it?
I think this is an area that needs a little more attention, honestly. I think, we have customer support help center on NBC.com, also on streaming Peacock and Vudu, but and we're plan to add more information there on an accessibility statement and have information on help topics on audio description, but that doesn't always address kind of those local station issues and various other. It's not. I think this is an area that we could all do. I mean, I feel like we could do better, frankly, and just in terms of making it clear who do you reach out to, because it's a confusing mix at times, right? I saw this during the Olympics. It was, do you talk to your local station? Do you talk to your cable provider? Do you deal with your, AT&T, dish provider? Who in the chain is responsible? And it was challenging to track down for folks. I do say that when we found out about an issue, I think we were very diligent about troubleshooting those and trying to solve for them. But honestly, I think this is the space that needs a little work to be transparent.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too, and echoing what you said. Yes, the accessibility statements will have a contact email, a contact point. In many cases, we have, actual ways people can reach out, but usually by email or a contact form. And for us, again, being a content provider, it's always an interesting thing. If it does come to us, we can try to help, but there's this whole media supply chain. And so that is something that I think it's really working together to figure out, the best practices for that. That's a real governance question in itself. Yeah. But I will say that the spirit and the will to help is definitely there, I think, with all of us. It's figuring it out.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Martha. I'm sorry.
I think it's really interesting listening to those answers, and especially Laurie. I really appreciate your insight on that based on your experience with the Olympics. It sounds like it was pretty eye-opening. We do have resources at the network, and we're working on making that a bit more robust. But it is not an answer to that, complicated web of things that can go wrong. But on the web page that I mentioned before, there is a phone number, and if anyone happens to call it, they might recognize the voice of Mark Turitz, who is our 24/7 dedicated, problem solver and, advocate and champion on all things accessibility for our company. He's working on adding an email address to that webpage so that consumers can send individual concerns, questions, complaints. But yes, I do think that it's a valid point that can't, it's perhaps not a centralized enough way to make sure that questions are going to the exact right place at any moment.
Yeah, and I would also add that when we, with our customer engagement teams, and there's a real dedication to help people, that also requires training to deal with the community in a way that is sensitive and inclusive. And so we work on that. But when you combine that with the fact that it's going across our industry in a media supply chain to different places, I think we would just ask people to, the feedback is fantastic, but also understand we're dealing with some complexities there.
I also want to just shout out to, Comcast has an amazing accessibility support center, fully staffed. So I think that's, if anyone's in the Comcast footprints, you can certainly, that's a great first line of contact. You can dial 1-800-XFINITY and say accessibility, and you'll be routed right over to the contact center for accessibility. And they are all, fully staffed to handle any accessibility questions. So that's a great resource to have. No problem if an NBC issue goes there, it'll get routed back to us. So
we honestly did that too. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I think another thing, just to kind of, as I was talking to our people internally about this issue, I do think that it's, the volume of concerns and complaints that we get about audio description are much fewer and further between than what we see on closed captioning, which is just, it's just by the nature of the service has, a lot more potential glitches, things that can go wrong at any given time. I think with audio description, if you use, for example, the FCC's informal complaint process as an example, the number of, we've received, virtually no complaints through that mechanism about audio description, whereas, closed captioning, there are just, as I think as diligent as any company is, there are just always, by the nature of it, things that
okay, so Martha,
issues.
So Martha is telling all the blind folks they should complain. I got no.
It's not what I meant.
No. All kidding aside, I am saying if you have any issues and concerns, please do let the FCC know. Because Martha's right. I know for a fact that they don't get, and it's not that they're complaints. I shouldn't call them complaints. There are things to point out where we can all improve the quality and the experience that we're getting that I think you would want to know so you can fix those issues. So that's how I would, rather than call it a complaint, it would be an issue of concern for us to look, for you to look at. So please do let the FCC know, or go to one of the places that these three panelists recommended, the website, and let them know. Because the more they hear from us, the better we can improve the services that everybody's getting. pretty.
I guess what I meant to say was that it works well overall.
I know, Martha. I would put in. I did that. I would put in words in your mouth, and I would just try to have fun.
I would like to quickly jump in on that though, because we do have a very good process for that. I'm really proud of our teams. If something does come in, we don't get that many, I hope, but we do have a good process for that. But we also, if we do hear about it directly, whether it's through one of our customer engagement teams or through the emails or through the websites, it's very high priority. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that it gets lost in a bureaucracy. It's not. It comes right to the correct teams. The question is, and I think this is an important point for a broadcast channel, is where in the media supply chain does the answer lie?
Right.
It's the real question. And so that's where I think, we may have to help each other, because, we can get the complaint, but if we're not the one that can fix it, finding who can.
Oh, absolutely.
Is a big issue. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Martha. I was not trying to put words in your mouth. I was just trying to have fun. So I only have a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. And again, if you have any questions for the panelists, if we have time, please send an email to clark@advocacy@acb.org. One other question is that, we hear concerns from the community from time to time that the sound quality of what the person who doesn't use audio description is higher than that of those who use audio description, whether it be, surround sound versus stereo or mono. We might get stereo or mono while the other folks get surround sound. Yet, ironically, the blind folks are the one community that invest in the surround sound, because, hearing is very important to the blind community. So is there anything that's being, and if you don't want to say anything, that's fine too, but is there anything that's being done about that, so that we can have parity within that area?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I got this directly from our very smart audio engineers who work on audio description. So I'll just read verbatim because I won't get it right if I don't. So a couple things. First of all, later this year for Comcast subscribers, we are adding the ability to access AD through a Bluetooth headset, so you can enjoy surround sound experience with AD. And then kind of more on the innovation side, so that's pretty near term. Next generation TV audio systems have the capability to very much improve the AD experience for audiences. So
is that AST3?
Yeah, so experimentation is underway now to test how a describer might be automatically mixed over the main audio stereo or surround soundtrack and made available to listeners by a global or on request selection on the TV or set-top box.
So that sounds like AI though, right?
I don't actually know. I'm just reading what the engineer told me.
But the good news is there are improvements on the horizon, right, and being looked into.
So I think some of this is in the experimental stage. So what I have a little bit more experimentation is soon to be underway for a feature that will allow the listener to reduce background sounds with control on the TV or set-top box. This would improve the intelligibility of the foreground sounds like a describer. That same process can operate with the main soundtrack, offering increased intelligibility for announcers, commentators, and actors over background sounds of events and shows. So the industry is evaluating the importance of next-gen TV features in whole, and audio features remain high on the priority list. So that's
okay, Laurie, I see a webinar coming up with your engineer.
No, we're going to have to bring my friend Jim Starzinski in to talk to this because I can't do it. But
and I know you've been talking to Tim Carroll over at Dolby, because I just had a conversation with him the other day saying that stuff is on the horizon. So that's very exciting.
We have some brilliant folks here, who really focus on innovation, and they're deeply, in with all of this, and specifically focusing in the kind of innovation in the accessibility space. So it's exciting to see what will be coming down the pike.
Okay, Martha and or Janet.
I would just come in and say what Laurie said.
Okay, that's fine.
These studios, if I may, the studios have these fantastic innovation teams and are always looking at ways to improve. But it's also that this technology is changing fast and does require a lot of work to look at that. So I'm not going to read off something like Laurie did. What she did was fantastic, but I do want to say that there is a strong interest in, as things innovate, in staying on top of it. And also, I just want to hint, Laurie, and I'm sure Martha, that when you innovate, we're looking at it. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Likewise.
Yeah.
Great. And Martha, do you have anything to add, or more or less the same?
Laurie's a bit braver than I am. I also got a technical answer from to this question, but I think it boils down to it's similar to what Janet said. This is an area that we are always we're looking to innovate and improve. I think kind of the bottom line of what I was told by my engineers is that technically, on the CBS side, right now we are limited technically to doing only a mono mix, and are not able to do surround sound or stereo on that right now. But we do, the highest quality mono mixed sound that we are able to do. And again, it is an area where we're looking to innovate. On our streaming platforms, we do have more flexibility there. And
well, it sounds like we will be looking forward to AST 3.0 when that finally launches. And that won't have some of the restrictions that the current legacy infrastructure has. Well, so my last question is, are there any innovations that we just talked about what in terms of sound, but are there any innovations or any other things you see on the horizon that we have not discussed about audio description that any of you feel comfortable, or even if you don't know that are any coming, what do you foresee coming in the future of audio description?
I'd like to just say something about, I wouldn't exactly call it innovation, but just sort of a shout out to our teams. One of the Warner Brothers pictures that I happen to love a lot, which is Dune, has a fantastic audio description on it. And what I particularly loved on it was that the audio description made the movie an entirely different experience. And so what we've seen is that there are a lot of users who do not rely on audio description, choosing audio description for that movie. And
right.
Because it's a very complicated book and almost unfilmable because everybody had things in their head, and the script for the audio description really carried that kind of sense of backstory in it. And I hadn't seen that before. So I think that there's not only the technical things we can talk about, but the fantastic work that some of the vendors we all use are doing. And I'd just like to give a shout out in that case.
I would agree. I think also, in addition to innovation, I think we're working to make this more ubiquitous, more standard operating procedure, as we collaborate and content goes all over the place to every which way in the ecosystem. It's important to keep the audio description with it, to make sure we're asking for audio described titles, just sometimes it's basic things, but just making sure that that's a steady progress toward greater coverage and greater, increasing the amount of coverage. I would say one thing that I thought was really lovely from the Olympics experience too, was having, we had a focus group with you folks with the ACB after the Tokyo Olympics, and it was so amazing. And I just would encourage everyone to think about this, to really get feedback from the community in terms of what's working and what's not. I mean, that was just something we stood up and had a great 2-hour conversation, and I grabbed all kinds of little lovely quotes and nuggets that I got to share out with our folks in the business to let them know that, by the way, having audio description really does make an impact on whether people can fully participate and fully be included with their friends and family when they're all watching, you know, sporting events in this case together. And I think, you know, we took that input in our, you know, our Descriptive Video Works, which did an amazing job with the live audio description for the Olympics and Paralympics. Took it into Beijing and, you know, made some adjustments. And so I think we're always needing to be learning in this space and we always really need to be listening to the community. So appreciate the chance to, you know, to connect with community and the viewers who are passionate and want this just to have more audio description. So I think all of us can learn from, you know, from the community. So we really encourage that kind of feedback.
That's great. Thank you. And Martha?
Well, I guess, you know, both Janet and Laurie put it very eloquently. And I think for a lot of the reasons that they've stated, I think one thing that we're probably all seeing is that there just is so much more momentum behind audio description right now than we've seen, I think, throughout its history, really. And that there is, you know, I'm seeing it internally within my company. I know all of us are focused on doing more and more on our streaming platforms. And I think that's, you know, comes across certainly in the services of NBC and Warner Brothers Discovery, as well as at Paramount Global. There's just, I think, a lot of focus and a lot of energy behind, you know, how can we continue to expand what we're doing and improve what we're doing? So I think now is a really, you know, exciting time.
I agree. As someone who's observed accessibility as a rule, you know, I used to work in the captioning field a number of years ago, and I think audio description now is just about where captioning was 20 years ago. We didn't have 100% mandate for captioning back then. We didn't, it didn't go to DVDs and VHS all the time. Well, that's more than 20 years ago. I'm dating myself, but I mean, we're starting to, and yet captioning's not, that wasn't required on VHS and DVDs, yet people started to do it because it was the right thing to do, and they started sharing files, and it started growing. And I think audio description's at that same place. We're about to see some monumental sea changes. And you know, I'm encouraged by the fact that you are looking into innovation with audio. I'm hoping that all of you start to think about a standard file format, so the files are easier to swap between each other, that there's maybe a minimum standard for, and I'm just throwing in some of my wish list. I'm not asking anybody to respond if they don't want to, but there's a minimum standard for audio description. I personally don't like text to speech as a voice, you know, so, but it's very exciting. I want to see if Clark, have you gotten any questions during the presentation?
Yes, Carl, we have.
Okay, you're now the moderator. I'm turning it over to you.
All right, and folks, this is why you want to be the moderator, because not only do you get to ask the questions from the audience, but you get to ask your own questions as well. And the first one's not a question, but a comment. Janet, I just checked the audio description project database, and I see that Westworld is now audio described.
That's right. I meant to tell you that, Clark.
On HBO. So a big thank you. And I know what I'll be doing this weekend.
Me too, by the way.
Now, if you guys can get the original movie with Yul Brynner from I can't remember, 69?
So 19 whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just do want to say that the team that does that, does the audio description on that, are amazing. Real pleasure to work with too.
So and that's a great segue for our first question. So Carl mentioned earlier that the audio description narrators, Norma Jean Wick and Tony Ambrosio, who voiced the audio description for the Olympics and Paralympics this past winter and summer on NBC, will were nominated and were awarded an Audio Description Project Award. So question first for Laurie. When you are, I guess, procuring audio description services, just like any other service with vendors, there are providers that do it better than others. How do you ensure high quality audio description?
Yeah, great question. I mean, obviously we've had great experience working with the folks at EDW, and as you recognized, I forgot to call out Clark. I think my favorite tweet from the Olympics was one that you made, which was that without audio description, ice dancing would simply be soothing music on TV. Sorry.
Oh, I love that. Okay, maybe Clark is smarter than me. I don't know.
It was just a great tweet. I saved that one. Okay, so to your question, yeah, I think this is an interesting one because actually I am not personally that involved in the selection or sourcing of our audio described vendors. So it's actually something that I'm going to be kind of working to a little bit more proactively now to kind of check on who all are we using for scripted programming. I know who we're using for live, and is there an opportunity to work with our supplier diversity team to make sure that we're including describers from, again, diverse suppliers and from the disabled community, et cetera. So I think that's a great opportunity actually to get more involved in sort of looking at how are we sourcing, vendors and for audio description. So definitely something that I'm interested in doing more of. And, again, this is also one where it would be great to hear from all of you in terms of who do you like to listen to? Who's great? Who's doing a great job out there? That would be great feedback for us.
Thank you, Laurie. Would anyone else like to comment about how you ensure audio description quality? From vendors, I'll add.
Yeah, well, I would just say that we have specific audio description teams, localization teams who work with specific vendors, although that number grows or changes as more people get into that space. And there's a combination of considerations that come in. Is it a tent pole? Is it, is it just a certain programming? And that becomes a challenge because we do use the same vendors and it could bottleneck as well, at times. So we have to take that into consideration. But we're also seeing in that space some tremendous talent. And I agree with Laurie about looking at the diversity. We also look at vendors who are actors in their own right. They are writers in their own right. And so as their experience builds, that becomes a consideration in terms of which property they end up on. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And folks, there is still time to submit additional questions if you email advocacy@acb.org.
Clark?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quick. You mentioned that NBC is receiving an award or the two narrators, I should say, are receiving an award for the Special Olympics. I also want to acknowledge that Mark Turret from Paramount Global is receiving an award for his a Lifetime Achievement Award for his dedication to audio description. So while we have Martha and
yes,
folks, I just want to make sure we acknowledge that as well.
Thank you for that, Carl. And Martha, the next question we have is for you and CBS, but other folks are welcome to answer as well. And first, again, I'd like to commend CBS and Paramount on their commitment to audio describe nearly all of their primetime lineup. But a question that we received here today and that we often receive from our members: what about daytime television? What are the networks doing to provide audio description for daytime television?
And I know who submitted that.
Well, I guess the truth is I don't know if we have any plans with regard to daytime television. I mean, I think, that we are always looking at, and making our decisions about what to describe. I mean, first of all, I guess, a daytime programming is not always network programming, right? So it comes from different sources. It comes from a lot of that programming comes from, syndicated vendors. So it's a slightly different animal than than CBS network programming. And I would say, beyond that, there may be some plans in the works to add description to some of those. I don't have insight into all of our business plans, but I do know that we are always thinking through, have to think through in terms of, resource issues. Where is adding audio description going to be the most valuable, and where are we going to get the most bang for our buck in terms of adding it. So I know that, always goes into our decision-making process.
I think another challenge with daytime programming in general is, well, a couple things. I mean, the production schedules and operations are very different for daytime television as opposed to, primetime or evening, because, you're talking about programs that are like near live or live, that kind of gets you into the live territory more, a lot of news, a lot of talk shows, and then you've got kind of soap operas. So again, I think you'd have the quantity would be quite different, and the pace of having to turn it around would be quite different. I mean, the turnaround time on something like a daily soap opera is so different than something like a scripted program that's on kind of a cadence of production, and so that shows on and airs on prime time. So I think you'd have challenges there. It's not impossible, of course, but I think you'd have some challenges in terms of the frequency and the turnaround time for anything that's scripted, and then a lot of live, or near live programming that's on daytime.
Clark, do you have one quick question? Because it's 6:25 and I want to make sure Katie gives the closing CEU credit code and that we wrap up. So do you have one quick question left?
Can I jump
Yes.
in? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quickly before that, I do want to say that one of the advantages we have over the networks where we have the programming going on TBS or on TLC or things like that is that there aren't a lot of the kind of programs they're describing where they're near live. And so when you look at the TBS schedule, you will see pretty consistent daytime programming, audio described. I'm not going to say it's all the time or that's a commitment, just right now and looking at that DBS schedule, it's there. So shout out to that team.
Clark, a real quick one, or are we got to move on?
Real quick one, the last one. I think from the questioner, this is more a comment than a question, but I'll phrase it in the way of a question. Do all of your broadcasters and video programmers commit to provide audio description voiced by humans as opposed to text to speech?
That is our practice. I can't say that we would never consider a use case for text to speech, but it is not something that we would look at for our primary use case ever, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the, on the CBS network, absolutely, we use live traditional voice, human voice, audio description. I can't say that we would never consider it on any platform. I understand the concerns about it, but it is also a technology that I think holds a lot of promise in terms of the ability to really increase the volume of audio description that's available. So, while we are not using it currently, I think it is something that everyone in the industry is taking a close look at because it has a number of benefits in terms of expanding the service.
Okay, I'm going to end it there because we're coming to the end of our time. I want to make sure Katie has time to give the closing CEU credit for those who are taking it to CEU. So Katie, go ahead, and then I'll just thank everybody and wish everybody a good night.
This has been a wonderful topic. And just so you know, Carl, we did have some hands in the Zoom room.
I'm sorry, I'm sure we did. And yeah, I know, but you have a strict deadline of 6:30 and I want to respect the time of the panelists. So I will ask this, if anybody has some questions that I know we didn't get to, that they please email Clark and we will email them to the panelists and they can answer them, hopefully answer them for you. So thank you for your patience. I'm sorry we didn't get to your questions. Go ahead, Katie.
And you can send those to advocacy@acb.org.
The closing CEU is 45,535, 45535.
Okay, I want to thank Laurie, Martha, and Janet for participating. I think we saw that all three of them represent organizations that have a serious commitment to audio description. And I am thrilled that ACB and the Audio Description Project have a relationship that is mutually beneficial to each other, where we can continue to work on audio description. And I want to thank everybody also for tuning in and adding to this great panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl and Clark. Great to be with you, Janet and Martha.
Likewise, thank you so much, and very great to be with both of you.
Same here. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.